So yeah, I'm going to be talking to you about a project that I've been undertaking with several colleagues, including Terry. And some of the planning that we're doing, and I think like several of the colleagues, I think everybody in fact that's presented so far, very much hoping to get kind of thinking and gain things from this event also. I am an early career researcher, so I've been involved before in impact in terms of assisting people in realising their impact vision, but I haven't had to kind of come up with those strategies and be involved in really thinking about how we achieve that in a project until now. So this has been a learning curve for me and continues to be, and I've kind of included some reflections around that as well. So yeah, so some of this is very much provisional. We're in the planning stages with some of our impact at the moment. So just to tell you a little bit about the TEL study. So the TEL study is, teenagers' experiences of life in lockdown, which I think almost the idea that this has been a difficult year for teenagers almost doesn't need an introduction at this point for people, because I think it's, we've seen a lot of these things in the media, certainly in terms of thinking about the teenagers ultimately that are joining us in universities. For those working on undergrad courses, there's a lot of considerations around how we facilitate these learning experiences for them and what kind of things have been in place for them this year, what kind of experiences they're coming to university from. So yeah, I think there's minimal argument that teenagers have faced disruption. I think the media would like us to think that all they've been doing is bad things, but there's a definite kind of awareness for us as a team of mental health researchers that this has come during a kind of key stage in development. So for older teenagers, this is disruptive during a time when actually they're starting to become, adults. They're starting to become more autonomous. They're starting to have more independence outside of the home, and they're also planning for the future. So they're either taking steps like taking exams, which this year was removed, going to university, which this year looks rather different, and thinking about joining the workforce, which is suddenly a very different landscape than it was at the beginning of the year. So we were really aware that actually COVID has introduced an awful lot of disruption for everybody, but some specific types of difficulties that might be experienced at this time. We were also aware early on, but I think this has continued, that a lot of the research in response to the mental health consequences of COVID has been very quantitative, and that what that isn't allowing us to do is understand some of the variability in young people's experiences. So what we wanted to do was understand how this is experienced subjectively, so that we can capture actually, well, what does this look like? What is it actually like to be this age in lockdown right now? And we really wanted to emphasize that subjective experience and start to understand some of the nuanced elements that maybe can't be picked up through using statistics, with an emphasis on well-being and kind of coping strategies that were being used. So yeah, 16 to 19 year olds, I'm just trying to move this bit so I can see my screen. Right, there we go. So the full team, I'm PI on this, but we do also have an excellent team. So there's myself, Emma Ashworth, who's at Liverpool John Moores, Alicia O'Neill, Terry Hanley and Kirsty Pert, who were all also within MIE. Just a little bit about what we did in the study. We did use a qualitative approach. We invited 16 to 19 year olds to write about their experiences anonymously. So they logged in through an online survey space, and they just wrote about what they were experiencing. We did give them some prompts to kind of help them with this, but we essentially said, we want you to tell us about this however you feel you want to. So some of them very directly answered those questions, and some of them wrote as a small essay. I think a couple just said, I'm walking the dog, I'm fine, or something quite brief. So it's quite a lot of variability in what they told us. So yeah, we had just over 100 young people share their experiences with us, which was actually more than we'd bargained for. It with a qualitative study, size is not of the most important thing, but we actually, given the level of interest that came back, we did reapply. We went back to ethics and put in an amendment for more participants, because it was clear that this was something that was an opportunity young people wanted to engage in, to be able to kind of share their experiences. So in terms of age, we did see that kind of variance across 16 to 19 was very much, they were spread across that, and the mean age was 17 and a half, so bang in the middle. Most were girls and women. I'm going to talk a little bit later on about some of the thinking that we've had around things like representativeness when we're thinking about impact steps. Because that does of course mean, there's a certain type of young person, and I think anyway there's a certain type of young person who's going to log in and want to write about their experiences. I think there's certainly, some bias that's introduced in that way. So yeah, all in some form of education, which leans into thinking about how we feed this back into education, and broadly similar in terms of ethnicity to what we would expect based on kind of national patterns for that age group. And I'm not going to spend, I'm going to try and move on to impact relatively soon. I hope, Terry, you'll tell me when I'm running out of time, because I can waffle on all day. But yeah, just to give you a sense, yeah, thanks, Terry, of the findings. So we've released 2 briefings. So this is our main briefing. We have also released another briefing that focused explicitly on the advice young people gave. So we did ask them if they would share some advice for other teenagers, and they gave really wonderful considerations and thoughts and guidance on what other people could be doing. So we do have another briefing that is all in participants' words that just tells young people kind of these strategies. But yeah, the kind of key findings in the main report was that this has been a time of heightened emotionality. There's been lots of intense emotions happening for young people this year, or for this age group this year. But also a lot of change and loss and uncertainty, some of that relating a lot to things like loss of exams, loss of university kind of expectations, as well as more kind of personal losses. There's a lot of value being placed on self-care, which is something we've been really thinking about as an impact strategy of how we can kind of share some of that. There's quite an emphasis on having a positive outlook and staying hopeful. And also lockdown is an opportunity for growth and development. So again, this is one of the things one of the reasons we wanted to do a qualitative approach was around capturing that actually, yes, okay, this has lots of intense emotions, but actually young people are telling us there's these other things that are quite beneficial about this. Also having a sense of togetherness, feeling connected to other people was really important and helpful, although there were a lot of barriers to that at the moment, as I'm sure I think adults know as well. This has been a tricky year. And finally, teenagers did express a fair amount of frustration with the government and the media. I think we had maybe one participant who felt things were kind of okay. You know, there was quite a lot of frustration with the government, particularly for lack of guidance for their age group and lack of safety considerations around their age group, which is interesting, but not what I want to talk about now, so I could get caught up in these. Okay, so we have taken some initial steps in terms of reach more than impact so far. So we wanted to think in the main briefing about how we could be clear about how this could be translated practically. So we did include kind of tailored sections. So the report included, you know, all of the findings, and then at the end, 1 page each for different stakeholder groups. So we had a page for teenagers, a page for parents and carers, a page for education staff and settings, and then 1 for mental health and wellbeing professionals. That's kind of summing up actually what might you do with this information? What might we need to kind of be considering in next steps? So the initial efforts so far have been about kind of really circulating that and reaching key stakeholders with the overall briefing. Reaching schools and colleges, going through children and young people's charities and organisations, you know, trying to find ways that we can get this briefing out there. And so far we've been able to monitor that reach. So we've had, I think about 15, as of this morning, about 1,500 downloads of each of those 2 documents. So one of the main briefing and one of the caring for your wellbeing briefing have each been downloaded about 1,500 times. But we are planning some next steps in terms of reach and impact. As I said, this is very much in the planning stages. So some of this may well change. So we're currently a little bit further in terms of reach. We're pitching to and writing for various outputs at the moment that are, you know, may be useful in reaching some of these key stakeholder groups and researchers with specific messages. Some of the organisations that we've either been contacted by or are in contact with are kind of listed there as examples. So we're thinking about how we can push further to kind of reach some of those groups. Obviously, it's difficult to say that that is an impact strategy per se. You know, it's difficult to say that that is actually going to monitor any impact that might come out of that. So at the moment, that's very much a reach kind of component, with hopefully some capacity for impact, if not something that we're measuring. We're also working with Terry Lucas to come up with some kind of event for policymakers. We're currently figuring out what that might look like through Policy at Manchester, which bit we want to kind of tease out, because there's quite a lot of points that do link with, you know, there's lots of avenues we could go down in terms of what we want to focus on in policy right now. For instance, there's things like young people have really expressed quite a lot of concern about the job market. And actually how policymakers can think about supporting young people and providing steps and strategies and programs that might actually provide some reassurance, as well as reasonable steps that are going to help them adapt to the fact that the job market is looking quite different, as an example. So yeah, hopefully that will be something that we land on what we want to do soon and get that rolling. We're also currently applying for funding through the Impact Acceleration Fund at the university, which we're hoping will help us come up with more targeted impact strategies and also monitoring of those impact strategies. So this is very much a work in progress. Both Terry and Carly have my draft of this with them at the moment for feedback. So Terry and Carly may think that what I've come up with is based on our initial conversations are terrible anyway, so this may all change. Yeah, so just to kind of give you a sense, the first strand of what we want to achieve if we are successful in getting that funding to be able to kind of make some further strategies is to create a training and resource package for teachers. So that would be some kind of a website within the University of Manchester's website, where teachers can access kind of three main components. So first, an asynchronous training video. So that would essentially be us as the telestudy team doing something like this, you know, pre-recorded mini lecture, as it were, where we're kind of outlining what we found, really emphasizing that idea of translating this into practical steps. I never thought I would actually enjoy asynchronous lecture content development, but evidently I am, because I'm extending it outside of teaching as well. But yeah, doing some kind of brief video that teachers can engage with, that helps them understand, you know, really think about the subjective side of things this year, and can share some of the insights that young people gave us. The idea is to kind of accompany that with a couple of specific resources. So one would be a lesson plan that they can use in the classroom. We're hoping to take that 1 minute, I'll hurry up. Something they can use in the classroom to have some kind of conversation with young people about their experiences of lockdown. So we're hoping to be able to develop that along with some other professionals. And also a resource for supporting students learning remotely, because we know this is going to be a real thing and that can be complicating for well-being. Lots of our young people spoke about it. Steps for monitoring that, we would do a kind of immediate follow-up survey to see if there's intention to use any of those strategies, but also a 4-week follow-up survey to kind of check whether or not they've actually used any of those strategies and whether or not they're useful, and hopefully incorporate opportunities for teenagers themselves to feedback on how they find engaging with the lesson. And then a young people strand. I'm going very quickly, Terry. A young people strand. This is a little bit scary to me, but I think could be quite exciting. So the aim would be to create a short animated infographic video for young people that integrates findings across these two briefings. So what have we found, but also what advice are young people giving to others about kind of caring for their well-being as the pandemic continues. We'd be collaborating with the university's drama students are on board for this. And also there's a graphic design company that specialises in this kind of thing. And we're hoping to be able to create one long video, but something that can be shared on social media segments as well. And to create some kind of creative way that teenagers can feedback on use of these strategies. So very quickly, a couple of reflections from me of kind of things that we're figuring out as we go, and also kind of learning curves. So first, engaging young people in impact monitoring. I'm very aware it's one thing for us to put out a video, but that actually seems it's quite difficult to be thinking about how do you actually get young people to then click a link and kind of go through a checklist, however creative it may be. So we're currently working out strategies we can use towards encouraging that without it becoming a kind of biased process. Being sensitive to the nature of the data, so things like the fact that we have got largely girls and young women. There's a certain type of young person who will have shared in some of these things. It may not be reflective of everybody, so really thinking about how we can undertake impact that's sensitive to that. Timings and resource availability, because this was an unfunded project, we all resources and time went into creating the report before schools opened, which meant we couldn't prioritise impact at the same time. So we've had to kind of look at IAA funding afterwards, which means schools are underway already, which isn't quite ideal, and it means we're having to be thinking a bit strategically about that. And a future lesson is thinking about how we can capture transformative impact for participants. We know that young people who take part in mental health research can find that a really valuable emotional experience. We've just had a paper accepted actually that talks about that. And that looks at some of those experiences. And we did have participants here writing sometimes at the end of their reflections, oh, it was really nice to kind of get this out, I feel a lot better. So actually in future, I think what I would be doing is thinking about ways we can actually include a question around that so that we can capture the impact for participants of taking part as well. Right, Terry, I'm sorry, I ran over, but I'm done. So I'll stop sharing my screen. Thank you.
Thank you, Ola. I wasn't sure if you could see me either, so I was glad that you responded to my 1 minute request in terms of that. But thank you very much for that. In being involved in Ola's project, it's interesting seeing the way that academics have to diversify and sort of end up becoming graphic designers, filmmakers, or whatever it is. And Ola's report is a work of beauty. So I'd recommend that you kind of all have a look at it.
I'm never doing graphics again.
No, it's interesting sort of challenges.